Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, we're going to cover everything that's happened these last 6 months since the last general conference. This is that video that I was talking about. And there's so much to cover. There's so many things that have happened. And like I've said in other videos, whenever we've gone back to some of these events, it feels like some of these things were a lifetime ago, but they aren't. It's just within the last 6 months. So I have a bunch of different spreadsheets pulled up, more than I realized, as I was thinking about doing this video. There's so much more to go over than just this one right here. This is my spreadsheet called Timeline Second Coming. Gosh, let's just get into it. First, let's take a look at the Flood the Earth Challenge. I haven't updated this since yesterday. This is where we're at, 6,848 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared, and 723 people have joined the challenge. So if we do an update on that, okay, let's count everything. Let's just do from May until now. So I'm just going to quickly add this up. So from May until now, we have a total of 37 reports of people meeting with the missionaries, which is really good. And then baptisms, 16. So that's a pretty good update, and I hope that continues. If you haven't joined the challenge already, please consider doing so. Just share a Book of Mormon, either digitally or a physical copy, and then let me know. Put it in the comments or send me an email. Keep the message very short and include the word flood, ideally hashtag flood. All right. And then we're going to look at this spreadsheet, but I think I want to save it for a little bit later, because this is like a good, just kind of comprehensive look of, all the major things that have happened since last conference. So we'll come back to this. Okay, now you may or may not have seen the video where I covered this spreadsheet. This is called Timeline First Presidencies. And something interesting happened since last general conference. So I had to look it up just to confirm, but President Eyring turned 90 years old in May. Okay, so after last general conference, he turned 90, which means that from that point forward, everybody in the first presidency, and then including the president, we have the first presidency, President Nelson, President Oaks, President Eyring, and then in addition to the first presidency, President Ballard, who's the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, all four of them are in their 90s. And this is something that's never happened before. And that's only been the case since May of this year. So all I want you to do with this is just pay attention to the colors. Okay. So you see red right here, and then red right here, red right here, red right here. Red means that at the time of that change in the first presidency, the organization of the first presidency, at that time, they were in their 90s if it's in red. So I took this all the way back to the beginning of the church, and it's never happened before. It's never happened. So that's just something interesting to consider. We've spent a lot of time thinking about President Nelson being in his, I need to change this now because I haven't updated this since the last video that we covered it, but we've talked a lot about him being 99, which means that he's now in his 100th year. If that confuses you, just remember, when you're born, you're not yet 1 year old, but you are in your first year of life. And then when you turn 1 year old, then you're entering into your second year. And so that's just something interesting to think about. And it's something that President Nelson himself has brought up a number of times, thinking about his age in that way, rather than, well, he's not 100 years old yet. No, but he's in his 100th year. So anyway, this is just one of the interesting things that hasn't happened before in the history of the church, where all the members of the first presidency are in their 90s. And then in addition to that, the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles also. So I feel like that's a little sign of what? I don't know. But anyway, and then we recently covered this spreadsheet. This isn't so much an update of what's happened since April, but I thought it'd be good to bring this up just to remind ourselves what's going to be going on this conference. So this spreadsheet is called General Conference Saturday Evening, where I wanted to look at the history of the Saturday evening session of General Conference, because historically, and as far as I knew, it was only ever the general priesthood session. You know, my entire life, that's what it was. But then that changed. They started in October of 2018. Instead of the general priesthood session, we had the general women's session. And then the next general conference, it went back. And then the next general conference, it went back to the women's session. And then April 2020, that's when we had the first joint session for the Saturday evening session. Everyone together. Then it went back to women's, and then it went back to priesthood, and then back to a joint, and then back to women's. And then for the last three conferences, it has been a joint, or no, including this upcoming general conference. So October 2022, April, and October of this year, all three joint sessions. And how does that stack up compared to the past? Well, like I said, it's pretty much always been the priesthood session during the Saturday evening session. And then to the side, we've always had these different sessions for women. And it's kind of changed throughout the years. So, for example, for this stretch of time right here, 2014 to 2017, we had the general women's session. That was not during the Saturday or Sunday days of general conference, but I can't remember what it was, like a week or a couple months before or something like that. But it was that. Before that time, it alternated between General Relief Society meeting and General Young Women meeting. And there's been other special meetings that have been associated with General Conference. So, but this is basically what it's looked like. So, but you see that in this column over here, the Saturday evening session going back to 1971, because that's as far back as the church website goes, and that's where I got all this information. It's always been the priesthood session until President Nelson's presidency. So this is unique. This is something to pay attention to, I think. And then we're going to have had 3 general conferences in a row where the Saturday evening session is a joint session. Make of that what you will. But I think that it's interesting. Okay, next. Let's take a look at this. This is my tracker to kind of keep track of general conference and special days. So let's look at 2023. So this year, April general conference. Okay. How do I explain this? Okay. So this year, the Jewish holiday or holy day that's called first fruits or Bikurim, it was not on the same day as Easter. Some years it is, some years it's not. Well, just forget all that. In April, what's interesting is that the Sunday sessions of General Conference, that Sunday was Palm Sunday, and it coincided with General Conference. And as you can see, that's not always the case. So from 2013 until 2019, General Conference did not fall on the Sunday of Palm Sunday, but this year it did. So that's what happened last General Conference. Okay, so you had General Conference fall on a special day of the year, in the Christian tradition, I guess you could say. And also, what's interesting is that April 6th, not associated with General Conference, but April 6th being the birthday of Christ, fell on the first day of Passover, Pesach 1. So General Conference, Palm Sunday, April 6th, it fell on the first day of Passover, Pesach 1. Now, this upcoming General Conference in just a couple days, it's going to be on The first day is going to be on the 30th of this month, September, which happens to be the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. The day before that, in the Christian tradition, specifically Lutheran, Catholic, Anglican tradition, it's the day of what they call it. There's a couple different names. One is the Feast of Saint Michael. Oh my gosh, the Feast of Saint Michael the Archangel and all angels. That's one name. And when it's referring to all angels, it's referring to Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael. We know that Michael is Adam, Gabriel is Noah, and then Raphael we don't know, but Bruce R. McConkie pointed out that it's probably someone from the dispensation of Enoch, if not Enoch himself. So it's just interesting that there's this Christian tradition, not that we observe it in our church, but this thing where you have these patriarchs, right? And when you think about Adam-ondi-Ahman, we know that all the patriarchs are going to be there. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and everybody else, all the righteous saints from past generations. It's just interesting that that's falling the day before this particular General Conference, which this conference starts on the first day of Tabernacles. So it's just some interesting things, just something to think about. Don't know that it's necessarily significant, but I just want to point it out. Let's take a quick look at this, my phrase tracker for General Conference. I'll zoom in. If you're new to the channel, this is simply a tally of General Conference talks for each year that include these words or phrases. And the way that I'm able to compile this quickly and easily, well, not necessarily easily, it is a little bit monotonous, but there's this website called the Scripture Citation Index by BYU. You go to search, and then you can filter it so it's just General Conference, and it just goes back to 1942. You search for a word or a phrase. For example, let's just do love, search, and then it'll bring up every single General Conference talk that includes that phrase. And then I just go down here and then I count them all up and then put them on this spreadsheet. So the way that I have this organized currently is I have all these sorted basically by year. So you can see how like there's a line right here. You see how it's dark, and then this, you can tell that there's kind of a line compared to previous years. That's because the way I have it sorted is from the time that President Nelson became president of the church, I have this sorted by the year that had the most mention of these words and phrases. So, for example, Palm Sunday. From 2018 until now, 2023 is the year that has used the term Palm Sunday the most, with 9 times. And of course, since we haven't had the October General Conference, this would only be from the April General Conference. So Palm Sunday, that was kind of a big deal this year in April. Also Jerusalem. It actually ties, 2023 ties with 2021, but I have it organized according to the most recent year if there's a tie. So the word Jerusalem was said a lot. Overcome the world at 6 times already, which is quite a bit if you compare it to these other years. So in 2022, for the full year, overcome the world was only said 4 times. But already this year, with just one General Conference, it's already been said 6. So it'll be interesting to see how many times it's used in October General Conference, if at all. Flood, great glory. And I did a video about great glory, and it seems like every time we use that phrase in the scriptures, like in power and great glory or things like that, it's usually in reference to the second coming in the last days. So great glory for April 2023. Jewish, which Jewish is actually, if you go back in time, it's not really brought up a whole lot. It kind of is. In the 60s it was. But it seems like there's been a little bit of a resurgence since the time of President Nelson. with just a couple years missing. He is risen against the church, royalty, pure in heart, preparing the world, bridegroom. All right. And then there were a couple of these which were notable because they haven't been used so far. So, for example, phrases like never been more important, never been more imperative, never been more needed, etc. I searched all that. It's currently in column Y. And you can see from 2019 until 2022, there's been a lot of it's never been more important, imperative, needed, etc. Except for in 2023, suddenly it's blank. It's interesting. You would think that there was something kind of going on here, and certainly we are living in unprecedented times in many respects, but nothing so far. So we'll just have to look at this general conference and see if they say anything like that again. Maybe we're near the end. If you go back in time, there you don't see it a whole lot. Pay attention here to column Y. It's pretty infrequent, comes up, every now and then. And then suddenly, 2019 to 2022, it's brought up quite a bit, and then it just dies in 2023. Maybe because time is up. I don't know. This is kind of interesting. Now is the time. There was a big spike in 2022, but then just once in 2023 so far. Look at this. In coming days. Well, we have coming days and then in coming days. So it's similar. And this would include in coming days would include coming days as far as like the results go. So I have them just side by side, but you can see during President Nelson's time from 2018 until now, it's been mentioned quite a bit, except in 2023. It just goes quiet. Go back in time and it's not really there. It's not really there. There's a little bit in the 90s and maybe the early 2000s, but something changes at the time of President Nelson. In coming days. This is a phrase that makes you think that something is imminent. It alludes to things happening in the near future. Compare coming days to like coming years or decades or whatever. It's coming days. That's like pretty close. So a lot of coming days during President Nelson's time, except in 2023. Let's see if there's like anything else that kind of stands out. I think that was pretty much it. 2021 was the year for Temple Recommend. For some reason, there's a spike in 2021 about for Temple Recommend. You go back in time and 2021 holds the record for Temple Recommend, which would make me think that they're trying to communicate, hey, make sure that you have your Temple Recommend. And so far this year, it hasn't been said. Maybe that time, maybe we're a little bit too late at this point. It was 2019 when President Nelson said that time is running out. But then it's in 2021, 2 years later, that there's all this talk about Temple Recommends. So I don't know. Let's move on. Just going to see if anything else stands out. The word global, you'd think that maybe that would have already been said this year so far, but it hasn't. Ongoing restoration. Let's see. I think that's pretty much going to be it for now. I think those are the big ones. Yeah. So let's go ahead and let's move on to a new spreadsheet. Okay, this is my spreadsheet called Church Specific Signs. So I had to put this together because there's been so many different stories that I've covered that have to do with signs that seem to be specific messages or messages specific to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints rather than a general audience. Although a general audience, could appreciate it too. But for example, in 2024, we have the eclipse that's going to be happening on April 8th, which is interesting for two reasons. One is that that's the day after General Conference. And then number two, it's going to go over the sacred grove. And I'm talking about the path of totality where the actual shadow goes, where you get the full effect. It's going to get passed over the sacred grove and the Kirtland Temple. That's church specific. Those are a couple of our most important sites in church history because God the Father and Jesus Christ appeared in the sacred grove, and Christ and other prophets from previous dispensations appeared in the Kirtland Temple. And the Kirtland Temple is the first temple that the world's had since the destruction of the second temple by the Romans. So very significant sites. In 2017, there was the other Great American Eclipse, and that eclipse went over Jackson County, Missouri. It went over Far West, which used to be church headquarters for a time, and it also went over Adamon-Diamond. So even though these other Christian denominations, people that are also watching for signs of the times, they view the eclipses as significant, but not as much as we should, because those two eclipses go over our sites, including the one that's going to happen in October. There's a third eclipse, and let me just show you this one more time. Okay, so let's go to Google Earth. Let me turn all this off. Let's go to Utah eclipse, and let's turn on temples. Okay, so the path of totality is right here. Here's the upper edge or limit of the path of totality, and here's the southern. Okay, and all these white and blue dots represent temples in Utah. And what's interesting is that look at the size of the path of totality. It has to take this path. This is basically the only path that it can take to miss as many temples as possible. There's only one that's in operation that's going to be in the path of totality, the Monticello, Utah temple. Up here, the Manti temple is currently decommissioned for renovation, and then the Ephraim temple has not been constructed yet. So in my mind, I see this as a sign. What are the chances that there would be these 3 American eclipses? And all of them go over church-specific sites in such a manner. Utah, that's where the headquarters of the church is. And the path of totality is missing the maximum number of temples that it can. Okay, but that's in the future. What's happened since last General Conference? There are 2 church-specific signs. One, August 8th, that's when Lahaina, Hawaii, was destroyed. And out of the few structures that survived, both of our churches, both of our chapels remained. So if I do this, if I go to Google Earth and we do LDS Lahaina, it should pull up the 2 chapels. Yeah, here we go. So Oh, come on, load. I want to see a higher resolution image. All right, whatever. So here's one of our chapels. It did not get destroyed. The fire came up here. It crossed this, whatever this is, and it burned some of these buildings. I saw pictures where these buildings over here were burnt, but these ones over here were not, including the chapel. And then here is the other chapel, and you can see around it, the fire came right up against it. Right here, look at this. Right up against it. But the chapel remained. There's some other houses here that thankfully survived as well. But this one remained as well. We've also talked about the banyan tree, which I can't pull that up right now because it's all... Oh, wait, here it is. The banyan tree, this is like a landmark in Lahaina. It's the largest banyan tree in the United States. A banyan tree is a type of a fig tree. Obviously, fig trees are significant to us, into prophecy, and fig trees are important. It survived. Just like our two chapels, this survived. And it just so happens that the history of this tree is it was planted the same year that David O. McKay was born. David O. McKay went on to become president of the church, and it was under his presidency that BYU Hawaii was established as in the Polynesian Cultural Center. So I count this as another LDS specific sign. And then we had a derecho that went through Nauvoo. A derecho, if you don't know what that is, it's essentially a weather phenomena where there's really strong thunderstorms, but I can't remember the exact definition, but essentially they go in a straight line for 300-400 miles, something like that. Strong winds that are like hurricane force winds. So it's kind of like an inland hurricane for all intents and purposes. And this year, it went through Nauvoo. But not just that. I did a video. Let me pull it up really quick. And I think it would be worth your time to watch this. Okay, let's do Nauvoo. I interviewed a member of the church there named Elaine, where they witnessed a miracle take place. There was a youth trek trip that was going on, and they were out on the trek pulling the hand carts as the derecho was bearing down on them, and they miraculously got to safety just in the nick of time. I can't relay all the details of that story, but I'll put the link for this video in the description below. It was pretty incredible. So I feel that was another LDS specific sign that happened since last General Conference. So the Nauvoo derecho and Lahaina destroyed in the two chapels that are there surviving, along with the banyan tree. All right, so we had that happen. This is my spreadsheet for wildfires. And the way that this goes is I have listed wildfires that were either the largest or deadliest or most destructive in these different locations. So if it was the largest in this location's history, then it's this red color. If it was the deadliest, then it's this black color. And if it's the most destructive, like destroying buildings and stuff like that, then it's this dark gray color. So I don't have the months on here, but I don't think any of these would have broke their respective records unless they had been after April, because it'd be after April that fire season gets going and stuff like that. So all these right here, 2023, these all broke these different records since last General Conference. So for example, the first one that I have is British Columbia having its largest wildfire of all time, the Donnie Creek fire. Canada as a whole, the entire country has had the worst wildfires that it's ever had in its recorded history. Hawaii had the deadliest wildfire in its history, and it's one of the deadliest fires in U.S. history. Last I checked, and I think that it's probably still the case, the death toll is at 115. I'm not going to look it up right now, and I haven't seen anything saying that it's the largest wildfire in Hawaiian history. I'd be surprised if it wasn't, but I haven't seen anything to confirm that. So right now, I just have it down as the deadliest wildfire in Hawaiian history. Greece had its largest wildfire in that country's recorded history. Greece is also part of the European Union, and for the entirety of the European Union, this fire in Greece is the largest in European Union history. So Canada, these are sizable places. The potential for really large wildfires, there's not a lot of places that can happen. So for example, we have Canada, the United States, which would be capable of producing really big wildfires. It's not like you're going to have like a really gigantic wildfire down here in Mexico or in Central America. You can in the Amazon, and there has been in the Amazon or just in South America. And then the European Union, geographically, it's a large area. And then there's also Russia. And it just so happens that Russia saw its worst wildfire season in 2021. So the places that are most likely and capable of having large wildfires and wildfire seasons are having them. So Canada and the European Union this year, since last General Conference. Louisiana, just this month. Let me turn it on really quick. Let's go to events. I just want to remind myself what day that happened. On the 4th of September, that's when it started. But the state of Louisiana has had its largest wildfire season in state history, and that just happened this month. And then Nova Scotia of Canada has had its largest wildfire season in that province's history. So that's a total of seven locations that have had either the largest or most deadly wildfires in their history. That is quite a bit. For example, I only have one for last year. New Mexico had its largest wildfire, which were a couple wildfires that combined the Calf Canyon / Hermit Peak fire. But I don't have anything else for 2022. Not saying that it didn't happen, but it didn't get on my radar. It didn't come up in any of my searches. Looking for record-breaking fires is a little bit harder to find, so I'll probably update more in the future as I find them. But I just want to point out that on my spreadsheet, it pretty much all starts in 2004. Since 2004 until now, so basically the last 20 years, we've been having a lot of fires, very, very serious fires. And just within the last 6 months, there have been a lot. All right. Earthquakes. So the deadliest earthquake this year took place in January before last General Conference. That was that big earthquake in Turkey, killed 59,259 people. But since that time, we had that big and very devastating earthquake in Morocco. And that happened the day before President Nelson's birthday. Over here. Okay. Marrakesh. In fact, why don't we... I'm going to look that up. Marrakesh... No, let's do this. Morocco... Oops. I always make that mistake. Morocco earthquake death toll. Looks like it's still 2,900, about 2,900, just under 3,000. So thankfully that hasn't gone up more, but it was a deadly earthquake. In fact, it was the third deadliest event this year, like natural disaster event. The first one was the earthquake in January in Turkey. Next would be the flooding in Libya, which, by the way, that took place in the same region of the world, North Africa, and it happened one day after the earthquake in Marrakesh. So the day before President Nelson's birthday, Marrakesh, the third deadliest event this year. The day of President Nelson's birthday, the second deadliest natural disaster this year, primarily in Derna over here, but affecting this entire area, the north coast of Libya, and also Tunisia. Okay, so it's been a deadly year for earthquakes, and the earthquake from Morocco after last General Conference added to that death toll. You have to go all the way back to 2010 to find a deadlier year for earthquakes. Okay, and then this brings us to my disasters spreadsheet. And if you'll pay attention to these columns over here that I have highlighted in yellow, the yellow means that all of this has happened since last General Conference. All of this has happened since last General Conference. I'm not going to go over every single one, but let me give you some of the highlights. And one of the best ways to do that is to go back to Google Earth. And let me do it like this. Let's take off those years. Let's get rid of April, March, February, January. Okay, so everything that remains, all this has taken place since last General Conference. Every single, except for maybe one or two, every single one of these blue place markers right here represents a place that got hit really bad with flash flooding in like metro areas, where you have the typical scenes of people getting swept away by the current, roads turning into rivers, cars being swept away, dumpsters being swept away, just really insane flash flooding in populated areas that make you think that the world is basically broken and that it's the last days and that the second coming is soon. Okay, let me zoom out. I'm going to take off borders and labels because that kind of distracts a little bit from it. There was a lot of that going on, a lot of this flooding going on in Spain. There was really, really heavy hail in Spain, which destroyed vineyards, and I did a very interesting video about that. I would encourage you to go watch that because that happened around the same time that there was this like literal flood, a literal flood of wine, because there was a distillery in Portugal that there was like some kind of like structural failure of one of the vats, and it or something, and it produced scenes where there was actual flooding of wine going down the streets of this town. That happened not long before or after, I can't remember, when all these harvests got destroyed by this hail that just completely destroyed all these like vineyards and other crops. We have like Croatia and Serbia. We got Bulgaria. Greece has seen a bunch of flooding and fires. Turkey. There was flash flooding in Israel, in Gaza, which that's not something that you typically see. We had it happening in Ghana and Nigeria, where those are two big countries for the church, especially Nigeria. Nigeria has the most members of the church in Africa, and it's one of the largest countries in the world for the church, for church membership. Congo got hit. South Africa got hit. We have Iran. I better turn on the places and borders again. Okay, that actually doesn't help. Tajikistan, India, Myanmar or Burma, Thailand, Indonesia, China, and I know that there's more that I haven't gotten. In South America, Brazil, Argentina. Anyway, there's just been a lot. There's been a lot. And these are unusual events. You may think, oh, this happens all the time. No, it doesn't. The ones that I handpicked and put on here, no, they don't happen all the time. And I have article after article after article that supports that. Many of them are record-breaking events. Okay, so all these grayish-white circles, these are capital cities of states and countries that saw Canadian wildfire smoke this year. This was a really big event where skies were darkened with haze. The moon was turned to blood. The sun was darkened. I think a lot of times when people think of that prophecy about the sun not giving his light, they picture like the sun, like the fusion reaction to stop in the sun and everything to go black, or something like really big, block out the sun or something like that, in a very, very, very dramatic way. I'm not so sure. I could see this being an event that which would fulfill prophecy. And it covered a very, very large area, most of the United States. There's only a handful of state capitals that did not experience this wildfire smoke. So all of Canada, because the wildfires are in Canada, a lot of the smoke came down into the United States as far south as like Jackson, Mississippi, Montgomery, Alabama, Atlanta, Georgia. It also crossed the Atlantic, and Lisbon, Portugal, and Madrid, Spain also saw the wildfire smoke. So it was huge. So there are a lot of things that happened since last conference. The entire city and capital of Northwest Territories, Yellowknife, was evacuated because there were some fires that were making their way toward the city, but thankfully the firefighters were able to stop the approach. But an entire city got evacuated, and it was a capital city. All right, so let's go back to this. So there's been a ton of disaster happening since last general conference. Okay, comets. Yeah, we have some comets to look at and think about. So, for example, after general conference this year, after April general conference, there's this comet called 12P Pons Brooks, which abruptly brightened 100-fold. So that was an interesting happening. We've had another comet, Nishimura. It's already come and gone. And they were thinking that it was the fourth ever observed interstellar object, meaning something from outside our solar system. And well, that's pretty much by way of comets. There's a whole lot more here to talk about, but I did an entire video about that. Upcoming, though, the Pons Brooks comet is going to be visible during the 2024 eclipse. If you're in the path of totality, they're saying that you should be able to see the comet, but you'll probably need binoculars, but it'll be visible. And then its closest approach to Earth is going to be June 24th of next year. But anyway, we had this comet, Pons Brooks, that suddenly got 100 times brighter. This is my quotes second coming spreadsheet. And I don't have very many from this year. I only have one. If you look at previous years, I have just quote after quote after quote. These are all quotes that really stand out. They're things that are unusual. They're quotes that have to do with the second coming, so that you can go through this and really see that they are talking a lot about the second coming in very clear, concise, explicit terms. There's no excuse for anybody. If you're a member of the church and you watch General Conference, there's no excuse for being caught off guard. They're just telling you in regular English. You know, you don't have to read between the lines. So this is it's a compilation of all these quotes. So for 2023, I do have one. Why do I have? It shouldn't be May 2nd. It should be, I think, April 2nd. Yeah. So this is from the last General Conference. Okay, this is by Elder Ronald A. Rasband. The name of the talk is Hosanna to the Most High God. And here's the quote. He says, I leave you, this is at the end of his talk, of course, I leave you with my blessing as an apostle of Jesus Christ, that you will diligently strive to live righteously and be among those who, with palms in their hands, will herald the Son of God, the Redeemer of us all. That, of course, is talking to a specific group of people, and it's in reference to the second coming, because that's what we're going to be doing when he comes. So that's what I have so far for this year. I need to go back, and if you have any quotes from this year to add to this spreadsheet, please send them my way. Ideally, send me an email. My email address is in the description of every video. So just go to the description box. My email is there. It's my.christian.homestead@gmail.com. All right, and then here we are back to President Nelson's talks. I just did a video about this, the last video, where I was talking about how neither President Nelson or Elder Holland are going to be physically present at General Conference, but they'll be watching, and President Nelson at least is going to have a televised or a pre-recorded. He's gonna deliver his talk. It sounds like maybe just one talk in a recorded message. So we've taken note of the fact that his last talk in April 2023 was his 40th talk since he became president of the church. Don't know that means anything specifically. You know, we may have a few more years before he passes away or the second coming happens or whatever. Don't know. But we're just taking note that the last General Conference ended on an even 40. And the number 40 in the scriptures is used. It's associated with some pretty significant events. The one that I think about the most is the flood, Noah and the flood, because that was how much time the earth was flooded and was cleansed from iniquity. And the second coming is going to be, it's going to be the companion event to the flood. The flood was the baptism of the earth, and the baptism of fire when Christ comes, that's the earth's, receiving the Holy Ghost. So, I've noted lots of interesting things and patterns in President Nelson's talks, and you may be like, "Oh, he didn't do that on purpose." No, I think he does. Sherry do, and look up. Dang it, I can't remember what the talk was, but there was a talk that Sherry Dew gave where she talked about the give thanks message that he delivered. I think it was November of 2021, I think. And he wanted that message delivered and published on a certain day at a certain time. And he also wanted the length of his video message to be a certain length. So that's at least one time where the timing, the day, the time, and the length of the video, he had a specific thing in mind. And so if you watch my other videos, then you know. So it's not really that far-fetched. So again, he has included has mentioned the renovation of the Salt Lake Temple 7 times. And it was 7 conferences in a row. 7 times, and then it stopped. 7 is the number of perfection, completion. And that's how I'm going to look at it. That was a special pattern in his talks. There was the other one where you had his first conference, he spoke 5 times, and then the next conference 4, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. So there's this kind of like mirror type image thing where in the very middle talk of all those talks, that's where he said that time is running out. He showed a picture of Paradise, California, the city that was burnt down by fire, similar to what's going to happen to the world at the second coming. And he said time is running out. But I've already covered that enough. So someone mentioned in the comments, and I can't pull it up right now, but someone had said something to the effect, it's interesting that he's given 40 talks, in that this next general conference, based on what we read, it seems that he's going to give just one talk, which will be pre-recorded. And that talk would stand apart from all the rest of these talks because it's a recorded talk. He's not actually speaking in person. Don't know that that means anything, but if you're symbolically minded, it could be something like, if the second coming really is very soon, this symbolically would have delivered the message of 40. Like, okay, the prophet of the second coming, he's going to speak to you 40 times, and then the end. If you have another talk that's recorded, it'd be 41. And of course it would be a talk, but maybe it's kind of like, okay, it's the end. I'm going to give you just a tiny bit more, just one more. It's not going to be part of the 40. I don't know, something along those lines. Maybe not. Just something interesting to think about. That takes us through the spreadsheets, except for this last one right here. Okay, so we are going to start right here. In April, and I don't know the exact day because I haven't been able to find an article that states a specific time that this was observed. But sometime in April, the star Betelgeuse began to shine 150% its usual brightness, which moved it from the 10th brightest star in the sky to the 7th brightest star. This is the same star that at the time of Christ, before the time of Christ, in literature, in different writings, it was described as yellow in color. After the time of Christ, there was a change in literature where the people after that time started describing it as a red star. So that was kind of an unusual occurrence. Excuse me. If we go back to November 2019, just before the COVID-19 pandemic began, that same star dimmed. And they didn't really know what it was. They now believe it was essentially like dust, I think. Whatever, a dust cloud of some sort that obscured the light of that star. But whatever the case, that star, Betelgeuse, it dimmed at the beginning of the pandemic. And it was dim all the way until March of 2020. March is the year that the angel Moroni dropped his trumpet, and then 2 days later, the missionaries were called home, and then 2 days after that, all temples worldwide were closed. That's when the dimming stopped. Okay? And now, in 2023, it is now doing the opposite. Instead of dimming, it is now shining 150% its usual brightness. Move from the number 10 spot to the number 7 spot. Those two numbers are considered perfection and completion. 7 in the creation of the world sense, and 10 in the mathematical sense. And I just talked about this with Rabbi Gerfein in our latest video. We were talking about the nations. And in Judaism, the number that's associated with the nations of the world is 70. And that's why we have, the quorums of the 70. They have to do with the nations of the world and taking the gospel to the nations. So you have a star that was in the number 10 spot. Now it's in the number 7 spot. Two very interesting numbers, and now it's shining brighter than before. And I guess it has what's called a bright to dim cycle, so it kind of like fluctuates. Well, that cycle has sped up, and now it's twice as fast as usual. So that happened in April of this year. On April 15th, there was a rare daytime meteor that exploded over northern Israel. And northern Israel is where Megiddo is, the site of the future Armageddon. So it was during the daytime, and it's rare, and it caused an audible boom, which adds to the rarity of it. And it happened on a Saturday, which for the Jews, that's the Sabbath day. And it went over northern Israel. And by the way, if you ever need to verify any of these things for yourself, if you go to my spreadsheet, I always have a column that's dedicated to the references where I get this information. So you can always come over here, copy it, paste it into your browser, and then check out those stories. It's interesting that this would happen over Israel this year because, at the risk of repeating myself for the 1 millionth time, this has been a particularly interesting year for Israel because they have these protests that have been going on all year. In fact, I have a separate column dedicated to the protest, column K, the Israel judicial protest, where because of these protests, there are former prime ministers of Israel as well as the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, not to be confused with the prime minister. Israel's a nation where you have a prime minister, that's like the one that has the power, and then like a lesser position called president. Him and former prime ministers have talked about the possibility of civil war. I've covered that quite a bit. So for this to happen over Israel, it's, over Armageddon, probably not a good sign. All right. April 20th, there was a rare hybrid eclipse over Southeast Asia, Australia, Pacific, Indian Ocean, Antarctica. There's only 7 this century. On April 26th, Israel celebrated its 75th birthday, and that's according to the Hebrew calendar. 75 is important because, let me pull this up. We go to, what is it? Quotes, rising generation. If I can find it, here it is. Just in a nutshell, it's been said time and time again, and all these different prime ministers of Israel have talked about it. I have references for that. They've talked about the curse of the 8th decade, meaning that Israel as a unified nation has never lasted more than 80 years. So was the case with Saul, David, Solomon when Israel was united, but then it split. So as a unified country, it didn't last more than 80 years. At the time of the Hasmoneans, which was just before Rome came and conquered Israel, they were not a cohesive nation for more than 80 years. And they take this serious. And you can read the news. You can read the Jerusalem Post. You can read Times of Israel, whatever. They all talk about it. And so that means that if Israel turns 75 this year, it's right in the middle of the 8th decade. There's also this idea that Israel corresponds with what's called the fig tree generation. When Christ talked about in Matthew 24, he talked about all these signs of the times, and they're like, okay, well, when's the second coming going to happen? And he's like, the generation that sees he talks about the fig tree, and he says the generation that sees all these things will be the generation that experiences the second coming. I'm paraphrasing. And people have associated the fig tree with Israel. I don't know if that's right, but I could see it being right. So anyway, that's an interesting development that this year was its 75th birthday. Okay, next, we saw the most powerful solar flare ever recorded. Not from our sun, but from all stars, including our own sun. The largest, most powerful solar flare ever recorded. It was in the Orion constellation. We were just talking about Betelgeuse, which is the right shoulder of Orion that has behaved in all these weird ways. In that same constellation, in Orion, there's a star system called V1355 Orionis, and that's where we saw the most powerful solar flare ever recorded. A sign in the heavens. May 6th, we had King Charles III, his coronation. The 40th, that's an interesting number, 40th monarch crowned since William the Conqueror's coronation on Christmas Day, 1066. I want to say the reason why they keep that number is because that was like William the Conqueror's coronation was, well, we all know William the Conqueror. Hopefully you do if you know British history. But I think his would have been the first coronation in Westminster Abbey, and therefore Charles III would have been the 40th since that time, I think. But anyway, having that change was huge. My entire life, all I ever knew was Queen Elizabeth, and it felt like she was just going to live forever, frankly. What's interesting is that she passed away the day before President Nelson turned 98 and became the longest living prophet or apostle of this generation. Very strange timing. Well, anyway, now we have a king of England and the United Kingdom. And so we had that happen. Very interesting. We had the dedication of the Richmond, Virginia temple on the 7th of May. And it was the 177th temple of the church, which is interesting. Bunch of sevens. There was a pretty big flare up of rockets being fired from the Gaza Strip by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and things were really tense earlier this year. So much so that I was like, "Oh my gosh, maybe this is it." That never came to fruition, but there was a lot of talk of like all of Israel's enemies coming together, all these different groups, and attacking Israel, but it didn't happen. I have that Tina Turner passed away, the queen of rock and roll, age 83. And if you're new to the channel, you might be like, why in the world would you have that on your timeline? The reason why is because when President Nelson turned 98, the months before and the months after he turned 98 and became the longest living prophet or apostle of this dispensation. You have all these different kings, queens, prime ministers, presidents that have been the longest serving or the longest living of their country. So, for example, Mikhail Gorbachev of the Soviet Union, he passed away around this time. Queen Elizabeth passed away. The longest living pope, Pope Benedict, even though he was not actively serving as pope, he was emeritus status. He was the longest living pope in the Catholic Church. He passed away on the 31st of December, on New Year's Eve of 2022. So you've had, and then on top of that, a couple weeks later, the longest living nun, Lucille Randon, passed away. So all these people that represent these different things, nations, churches, and I've included these pop culture icons because they have the title, even though it's unofficial, the unofficial title, such as the Queen of Rock and Roll. Because for some people, whether it's soccer, because there was the king of soccer that passed away, Pele, whether it's a sport or music or something like that, for some people, that's more important to them than nations or religions. So it's just to say that you have all these people. They're all passing away around the same time that President Nelson keeps going on. And notably, Jimmy Carter, he's just a little bit younger, just by like a couple months, younger than President Nelson. Well, he would represent the United States. And earlier this year, he went into hospice. And they're about to celebrate his 99th birthday coming up here pretty soon. But he's probably going to pass away pretty soon. And guess what? He's the longest living U.S. president, former U.S. president. And when he passes away, I think we're really, really in the red zone at that point, because I really feel like this whole thing is a thing. Okay, June 1st, there was a rare land spout, or it is a type of tornado. It's not like a classic tornado, but it's not a dust devil either. There was a land spout in the Salt Lake Valley. I took note of that because it's rare. It's odd. You don't typically have tornadoes along the Wasatch Front, which is the Salt Lake area. I talked about the downtown Salt Lake tornado in 1999. I've done videos about that. There was also another one 2 days after Elder Dean Davies from North Salt Lake passed away. And the tornado happened in North Salt Lake. And then this year, we have this. I know it says right here, no, that wasn't a tornado. A land spout is a type of tornado. So it's just saying it's not like a regular tornado like what you usually see. But it is a type of tornado. This happened in the Salt Lake Valley. Very odd. I'm taking note of it. Okay, June 2nd. Canadian wildfires. Smoke in New York City, Washington, D.C., Ottawa, and many other places. Now, that's what we were talking about earlier. That wildfire smoke ended up going to a lot of different places. And it actually started before June. In fact, well, I don't know. We already covered that. But the 6th of June, the Kakhovka Dam in Ukraine was destroyed, and it's been compared to, in terms of destruction, destruction compared to the destruction that a nuclear bomb would cause. So that blew up, and we had that happen. We had this thing where, even though it happens on a somewhat regular basis, this year there was this particularly bad infestation or invasion of Mormon crickets. That's what they're actually called, Mormon crickets, in Elko, Nevada. Covered that. Sorry. On the 10th of June, the White House hosted the largest ever Pride event. Very sad turn of events, and sad that we've come to that point as a nation. 8 days later, the Helena, Montana temple was dedicated. June 24th, you had the Wagner Group rebellion, which is that private company of mercenaries that Russia is using in the Ukraine war. And they did a what they called a justice march. They were marching toward Moscow, and then that ended. But it was like kind of a big thing that happened in the course of that war. And as of right now, the leader, or the president, CEO of that company, he's dead now. He died in a plane crash, at least supposedly. June 26th, there were 2 rockets fired from the West Bank, from the city of Jenin, for the first time in 18 years. So that's something to take note of when you have like new violence or things happening against Israel that haven't happened for a long time, because it could be an indication of what's going to happen in the future. June 29th, that's when we had the Nauvoo Derecho. And then July 3rd, the largest incursion into the West Bank in 20 years in response to those rockets that came from Jenin. It was called the Jenin incursion. On July 4th of all days, it was the hottest day Earth has experienced. I know a lot of people were confused by this. It's not talking about everywhere around the world experiencing record-breaking heat. It's the average. If you average all like weather stations, average for the whole world. Sorry. Gosh. It may have been. Oh, gosh, hold on. It may have been cool where you were, or it may not have been a record-breaking day where you were. But if you average all temperatures around the world, average, it was the hottest day that Earth has experienced, at least since 1940, when records began. July 20th, that's when comet Pons Brooks abruptly brightens 100-fold. July 22nd, Greece conducts its largest ever evacuation due to wildfires. On July 26th, foxes were seen on the Temple Mount, and that's a rare sight. And there's basically a prophecy that has to do with that. The Jews are kind of more into that because there's this whole thing about it. But this was only the third time that that's ever been like really observed and recorded since 2019. And there's nothing really before that anybody really knows about. So they associate it with the coming of the third temple and the Messiah. On August 8th, Lahaina was destroyed. And like I said, I'm sure they're going to talk about that in this upcoming general conference. I was starting to watch the church, what do they call it? The church's world report that they do every conference, and they brought up Lahaina, of course. The 13th of August, the Saratoga Springs, Utah temple was dedicated. On the 31st of August, there was a blue supermoon 9 days before President Nelson turned 99 on 9/9 on September 9th. The last time that there was a blue supermoon was on January 31st, 2018. That was the month that President Nelson became president of the church. Okay, September 8th, the day before President Nelson's birthday, his 99th. There was the 6.3 earthquake, 6.3 magnitude earthquake in Morocco that killed almost, so far, almost 3,000. The next day, President Nelson turns 99. And then on that day, we have the second deadliest event this year, the Libya flash flooding. That this one's a little bit more uncertain. In fact, let's see, Libya death toll. They were saying 11,300 people had died from this, but there's been revised reports. Well, this is from Bloomberg 5 days ago, so that's actually newer than the CNN. I read a CNN article that said, well, the UN is going with what they've been able to confirm. So it's been difficult to ascertain exactly how many people have passed away. But the UN revised it down to 3,958, which would still be the second deadliest event this year. But now I'm seeing this Bloomberg article, and it says more than 15,000. Oh, it says dead or missing. Okay, never mind. So we might have to wait more time before we get a final death toll. According to CGT in Africa, 8,540 people still missing after Libya floods. Death toll stands at 4,255. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. But that happened on President Nelson's birthday, of all days. Let me fix that. Okay. On the second day of Rosh Hashana, which is the Feast of Trumpets, and also the Jewish New Year, it was a Sunday, and it was the first time in church history, and really world history, that 3 temples were dedicated on the same day. Now, what's really odd about this, and I meant to bring this up in the video that I did about the 3 asteroids, and for some reason, not very many people watch this video, and I don't know why. And it's okay. It's okay, but I would encourage you to watch this video about 3 asteroids, because, let me pull it up. So what happened was, last year, 1 week before Rosh Hashanah, there were 3 asteroids that passed by Earth. One of them was unusually close, but you had these 3 asteroids that passed by Earth. Okay, whatever. Well, a couple months later, on Christmas Day, which was also the day of the 8 planetary alignment, and it was also the 8th day of Hanukkah, there were 3 large asteroids that passed by Earth on Christmas Day. And then Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the holiest day on the Hebrew calendar this year, there were 3 asteroids that passed by Earth. And one of them was unusually close, just like the one from the year before, the 3 that came a week before Rosh Hashanah. So, very, very strange. I'm taking them as signs in the heavens. And it's interesting that with Rosh Hashanah, let me look at the calendar here. So the 17th is when these three temples were dedicated. And then a week and a day later was Yom Kippur. And that's when you had 3 asteroids pass by the Earth. It's just very strange. I don't really know what to make of that, but I don't think it's coincidence. And that's all I have for the timeline. So, a lot's happened. A lot has happened since last General Conference. I have felt, and I'm not going to repeat it all, but I have felt that the last like 3 general conferences in particular have really become more and more explicit and on the nose about the second coming. I say that because the October 2022 General Conference, President Nelson called on us to be the people of the second coming. Just point blank, period. And that's never happened before. It's never happened before. Among so many other things that have been said. That was the conference that he said that we were going to see, excuse me, that we were going to see the most powerful, or sorry, the greatest manifestations of the Savior's power the world has ever seen. Exactly 1 week after he said that, we saw that gamma ray burst, which was literally the most powerful event, the most powerful and brightest explosion that humanity has ever recorded. It was in space, but it happened a week after he said that. And then in this video, we are talking about the largest solar flare that was ever recorded in the Orion, somewhere in the Orion constellation. So in space, we are in fact seeing the largest and most powerful things that we've ever seen. I'm sure that his statement goes beyond that. He could be referring to, for example, the second coming itself. He could be referring to the resurrection. He could be referring to any number of things. But the fact remains that we've seen the most powerful things that we've ever seen since he made that statement. So to me, I feel like things are coming to a head, especially given the fact that, things like this, the only time that we've had all the members of the first presidency and then also the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, all in their 90s, in the entire history of the church. We see these things going on with the Saturday evening sessions, things that have never happened before, as far as I know, at least going back to the 1970s. And then, where is it? And then President Nelson's talks that he's given. So we've gone from a maximum of 5 talks in a general conference, and now it would seem, unless he has a couple recorded talks, it seems like this is going to be the first time since he's become president of the church that we're only going to hear him once during general conference. And I don't know that means that he's like really close to passing away. There's just not enough information. It's the way that he made it seem is that he's actually okay. They're just being cautious with him resting and recovering and stuff like that. It's not like he's sick or dealing with something. It was just a fall. So I don't know. But that's the next entry on this spreadsheet. We're going to have October 2023 one time. If he does end up passing away for some reason, I mean, his presidency has been won for the record books. And the next presidency, which would be presumably President Oaks, unless President Oaks passes away, that almost certainly is going to be one for the record books. We're getting to a very, very interesting time in world history and in church history for all the reasons mentioned above. I think it's going to be a very interesting general conference. These last few general conferences, we've seen things that we haven't seen before. Like I said, being called upon to be the people of the second coming, President Nelson referencing the sign of the Son of Man, President Oaks, last conference giving a talk that was almost exclusively just reading Christ's own words from the scriptures. And so many other things, Elder Bednar doing that incredible talk about the wedding feast and wearing the wedding garment and just being so clear about it. The big call up of missionaries in April 2022. President Nelson bringing up and showing us 3rd Nephi when Christ comes to the people. And then last conference, the very next conference after he did that, asking us to read about Christ coming to the Nephites. Again, because that's a foreshadowing of our own experience that we're going to have with the second coming when he comes to the earth, to us. Everything just like is converging. That's the way that I feel. And I feel like there's really good reason to believe that, based on just everything that we've talked about here. All right, well, that's going to be it for this one. Like I said, in case you didn't watch my last video, I'm planning on doing a live stream after each session of General Conference. I have some stuff going on Friday and possibly Saturday morning. So I can't guarantee that I'm going to do a live stream after the Sunday morning session, but I'm planning to, but just don't be surprised if I don't. If I don't, then I'll do a live stream for the Saturday afternoon and the Saturday evening sessions. So we will be doing some live streams. So take notes for yourself, take notes to share with everybody else if you want to participate in the live stream, and we'll talk about what we see and what we hear. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. I'm really looking forward to it. I hope that you are too. But that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.